Hello, Oklahoma. My name is Joy Pullmann. I'm an Education Research Fellow at the Heartland Institute, a Hillsdale College graduate, and a mother of 3 kids. So I'm going to start out actually by telling you what I did tonight just before sitting down to record this video for you all at the behest of Jenny White, who is a very dear person and whose work and character I really respect and admire. Tonight was canning night. My husband and I were canning a bushel of peaches, and we have little toddlers, and the very last half an hour of us rushing back and forth all around the kitchen with boiling water and sticky juice and hot glasses. During that last half hour, our children were basically screaming at us the whole entire time. So if you're a parent, I expect that you're probably laughing or at least smirking because you know exactly what that feels like. Maybe you don't can, but you've had similar situations probably exactly this very day. And the reason that I bring it up is because, well, there are lots of credentials, that people can have about education, and some of them have more value than others. I think the number one thing the number one most important credential to have is to be a parent and to be advocating for your child. Because you and I both know if you are a parent, you know that it totally changes everything about the way that you see the world. And those little children, they can torture you, they can drive you mad, but you're also the only one that they're keeping up at night, for better or for worse. And you're the one who is worrying about all the very small details related to their life and trying to do your absolute utmost to give them a better life in a way that nobody else really does. And that's not a bad thing. Other people have their own kids, they have their own interests and so forth. It's right and natural that you should be the person who is your child's best advocate. And so that is basically the big reason why I oppose Common Core as a mother and as someone who is involved in education and cares deeply about it. And I just wanted to share for you a couple of the reasons why that is so, and kind of explain to you how Common Core is one of the latest line of a long string of education reforms designed to basically take parents away and local communities away from being in the driver's seat when it comes to education. So I'll also talk about why that's a better arrangement than having the government be in charge of it. So if you have heard of the Nobel Prize winning economist Milton Friedman, he's also known as the father of school choice. And one of the things that he observed in his writings is that you basically have, the choice of 2 groups when you think about who is going to decide how children will be brought up. You have the government and you have parents. And so each of these, neither of these entities is a perfect, each of them have their own weaknesses. There are a lot of rotten parents, and there are a lot of lazy bureaucrats. And of course, there are a lot of really great parents, and there are a lot of really caring bureaucrats who are trying to help the people that they're, put into their jobs to serve. But the real question comes down to who is more likely to do it better. Is it going to be parents? Is it going to be local communities? Or is it going to be somebody 2,000 miles away who doesn't even know my child's name? So obviously, I think it's me, and I think it's you, because not only do we know our child's name, as a mom, I have felt my child's heartbeat from the second that it's existed. It's been synced up with my own, and so on and so forth. And that knowledge and that love is something that drives us to advocate and to care for our children in a way that it doesn't for anybody else. So Common Core, let's talk about why it takes parents and it takes teachers out of the equation and really destroys the power that they have over their own kids, and why, of course, if we think parents should be in the driver's seat, that basically means that worse outcomes for kids, worse education, worse government, and so on and so forth. So the real reason, the short answer is that Common Core removes a parent's voice in education. It removes a teacher's voice in education. And I know those are strong statements, so I'll back that up. So some of the documents that I like to bring up, of the thousands of pages that Jenny and I have both read, are the agreements that states made to join both the Common Core project. And at its very beginning, there's a memorandum of agreement that governors and state superintendents signed, and there's also agreements that states signed with different testing companies in relation to Common Core. And I know that Oklahoma has gotten out of the national Common Core testing contract, but I know that you also have another testing contract coming up with a private contractor, and those are often equally restrictive. So some of the things that are involved with all of those documents include states basically saying other people, can decide what's going to happen in our classrooms. That's essentially what happens, and that immediately does not provoke a lot of surprise from people. Some think, well, maybe what if they can do it better? Who cares who does it as long as a good job is being done? Well, then this basically reflects a really poor understanding of American government. And so the reason, so I want to talk about why we have the way American government the way that it is, because it protects the rights and the liberties of the people that it is over. So the first thing to know about American government, well, I guess there are lots of things to know, but a prime thing to know about American government is that, of course, it's very different from a monarchical system. So, of course, Americans were repudiating, King George of England and so forth, that we definitely did not want to have a monarchy. The rule by one man who could be a benevolent single ruler, or he could be an evil tyrant dictator. So because of that, the American way of government, both in our federal constitution and our state constitutions, basically sets up a government where the power is not in a person, but the power is in the people all assembled. So it's basically this combination of sovereignty within the people who control government, and a combination of what we call the rule of law. Basically a structure, we don't have a straight democracy, so mobs can't run around like they did in ancient Athens and decide one day we'll go to war, and then the next day we're mad that the people we sent to war are at war, and we'll, send another party after them to kill them all, which, actually did happen. So we have our American founders to create this balance of where the power resides in the people, you and I, over our government to represent us, to represent our interests. But it's also really hard for we, the people, and for our representatives to get a lot done really fast, just to make sure that policies we do enact, we, the sovereign people of the United States, do enact, are in our best interests. So why am I talking about that? Because I'm talking about why the American system of government is set up to be a representative government. It's so that you and so that I have a voice in our government, and we basically are the sovereigns. We're the people who control the laws that go in place over us. And so the entire process of Common Core violated this fundamental right of the American people, this fundamental thing that sets America apart and has for centuries of all the other nations of the world. Of course, lots of them copied us, and of course we did a lot of copying of our own, of England and other countries. But of course, it's a uniquely American idea, the blend of ways that our governments are set up to give us that power to say what will happen over what will be the controlling factors in our lives. And so when states go and say we'll let nonprofits decide what kids will learn in our schools, transnational non-elected bureaucrats assembled by private interests, and I have no problem with private interests doing whatever they want, but private interests do not have a right to control my life. They don't have, the right that a government has that's set up in advance, where we know the rules, so we can also participate by voting, by complaining to our representatives, as I do regularly, and probably you do too, where we can actually have a say in the policies put over us. I can't call up the National Governors Association. I can't call up the Chief Council of State School Officers, and neither can you. I can't call them up. We can't call them up and say, this thing that you've done to us is a really bad idea, or this part of this thing that you've done to us is a really bad idea, and here's why. And we can't participate in those discussions they're having behind closed doors about the policies that they're going to then come and inflict on us and our children, in which we're going to pay through our tax dollars. So at its very heart, even though the folks who talk about Common Core say that it's a state-led initiative, that it's really an example of federalism, of people working together to accomplish ideal, what it really is, those are all deceptive labels for an enterprise that really transgresses against the rights that we have Americans to have a voice in the political process that determines many things about our lives. And one of the most important things to me, and probably to you, being what my kids are going to learn in school, how you and I are going to pay for it, and how that's going to be measured and assessed, and so on and so forth. So all of those things, because of the Common Core enterprise, are now out of your hands, and they're not out of my hands. In fact, they're out of a lot of our elected officials' hands. They're out of our teachers' hands. We can't go to our teacher and say, my son is really struggling with fractions. Can you try to teach him a different way? Or my son is really accelerated and I know fractions isn't in his grade level right now, but he can get to it. Please do something advanced with him. The teacher in the school can say to you, well, I'm not really the one who determines whether that can happen. I don't have the time. I have to get all the other kids up to fractions. I can't focus on your son because the state mandates me to do X, Y, Z. Or the local school board can say, well, we can't really, go for something different, or that we think might be better. We can't experiment in that way because these kids have to pass this test. That's measuring us according to an external yardstick of what some other people thought was a good way, to educate our children, and so on and so forth, up and down the line. So, like I said, the biggest transgression to me of Common Core as a mother, as a taxpayer, as a citizen, is that it removes the right, my right, it removes your right, given to us by our Constitution, given to us by, as our founder said, by God and by nature's God, and it basically says those don't matter. Those things, those rules that we all agreed to, that those rights that we get when we're born or as we enter this country as citizens. Sorry, tough beans. Good luck. We know something that's better than that silly way of arranging things, and we're going to just take care of it for you. And so that to me is that's the worst thing about this whole enterprise, is that there is nothing that trumps that right to self-government, that is, especially when it is, an untested mix of theories put out by a bunch of people. So if you just set aside the fact that these people did it without consulting you or me, even though we're going to pay for it and put our kids under this regime, then, we don't have any proof that the things that they want to do to our children are even going to be effective for them, which seems like a really obvious basic test to do of any sort of public policy. But those are lots of, in the weed sorts of arguments to get into. But it's really, really important that to me, let me explain the last reason that that's really important. It's because of something I've been talking a lot about lately that I think people need to understand, and we don't as a body intuitively get this anymore, so I have to make it explicit, is that American public schools and our system of public schooling do not exist. They aren't created by our state constitutions to do what Common Core wants public education to do. Common Core talks constantly about college and career readiness. And of course, nobody wants a child to grow up and be an economic dud. You don't want him sitting on the couch eating potatoes in his mom's basement, like I've had a few family members do, but luckily they've also so far gotten taken care of that. But what we really do want out of society are productive people. That's obviously a laudable goal, but that's a side goal. That's kind of an extra consequence of a good education if you look at it in terms of, why should I be paying for other people to get a better job? And that's something actually that Milton Friedman says as well. Vocational education for business training and so forth, it's not really fair to ask society to pay for that, because because society bears all of the costs and the individual reaps most of the benefits. You can argue, oh, well, he is going to earn more in his lifetime. That means he'll pay more taxes and so on and so forth. But first of all, we don't have a guarantee of that. But the second of all is, again, it's the individual who has the most to gain from being a good worker, from being a good economic producer. And so he has a very strong incentive to make sure that he enters the workforce that way. But what is really important to society in education, which is what our founders set up education for, and if you look in your state constitution, it will say the same thing, is to encourage, for example, Indiana's and Michigan's, which I've just looked at recently, talk about encouraging religion and morality. A number of them also talk about happiness being necessary. But really the whole point of education in a constitutional republic, a democratic republic, is so that the people who have to govern themselves, who have to be the sovereign people, are able to actually be wise enough to make decisions regarding themselves and their neighbors. So in short, public education in this country is seen as the essential means to good government, to citizenship. And we see absolutely none of that throughout the entire Common Core enterprise. It's just jobs, 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 workforce, workforce, workforce. And human beings are not, little pegs to be slotted into somebody's workforce machines after they've been stuck on the conveyor belt, from kindergarten all the way through college and the workforce by somebody outside of them, some central planner somewhere who decided that they knew, what the world economy would need 20 years from now. but the whole point of public support for education, of me paying taxes for it, of you paying taxes for it, is so that the products of that system. I just did the mechanistic way of talking about people that I just criticized, so that the people who arise, the mature adults, the citizens who are that sort of way of education births, they can stand alongside you. They can stand alongside me. They do care about the issues of the day, and they can analyze them. They know history, and they can say, look, we've done this before. That means this is a good or a bad idea. They can analyze, well, this, is a study. This study was actually not a very good quality study that they're using to justify this policy, and here's why, or so on and so forth. And so that is the return that we citizens should be getting from public education. And it's absolutely impossible for us to be getting it if the whole goal of education under Common Core says nothing about citizenship, says nothing about self-government, says nothing about the very reason that public education in America exists in the first place. You can't possibly get to it if you're not even reaching for it. So I think I will just conclude there. I'll get back to my family, and I'll let you get back on with your presentation. But I want to thank Jenny, and I want to thank you for listening to a video. I wish I could be there, except for the fact that, of course, as you know, my family keeps me back, and I have lots of other events to go to as well. But I thank you for being a citizen and standing alongside me and standing alongside your neighbors and doing doing your duty to examine this program that takes away our liberties and that negatively impacts our kids. And I usually criticize people for saying our kids, but since I'm talking in terms of you and me, I'll just say it negatively impacts my kids, and I think it will negatively impact yours. And that's why I thank you for being here, for listening, and for paying attention in an age where most people do not.